Before you jump onto lettering, copy the outline from what you have just drawn. This is the copy which we are going to fill in with type. Keep the original outline for making more copies if you need to later on. When you have traced a new copy of the outline, place an empty sheet of paper under it if you are using tracing paper like me. Now write down what you want to letter inside of the shape somewhere in front of you. Write in block capitals and leave a little bit of space between each letter to make it easier to count the number of letters you need to place inside of the outline and generally analyze and plan potential compositions. Decide on the placement of words depending on the shape of your animal. If it is long and narrow, consider keeping the words in one line. If it's more like a block, you can try to put words or letters on different lines. And if it's tall and thin, you can consider stacking the words or letters up vertically. Count the number of letters and divide your shape using a pencil into sections, one for each letter. The lines dividing sections do not necessarily need to be straight. You can incorporate some curves which could emphasize the character and imagined volume or perspective of your animal. For example, my lettering inside of the whale can be thicker in the middle where the top fin is, but thinner and smaller towards the tail and the head, because these parts just carry less weight and can also be further away than the middle of the body. Depending on the complexity of what you want to write, you might want to plan it in more detail by writing your words in the approximate composition which you want to create within the shape. When dividing your shape into sections, bear in mind potential variations in the letter width and proportions. Letters M and W are normally wider than the most and can fit into square, and letters I, J and lowercase l are narrower. This is useful to remember, but you can tweak proportions if you need to later on, or ignore it altogether if you want to have a kind of monospaced approach where all letters occupy the same amount of horizontal space. After you have divided the shape into sections for each letter, you can start sketching down letter forms. My approach to lettering within the shape is based on having letters which occupy solid blocks. So I always start off with a number of blocks from which I subtract letter form elements to create legible letters. With this approach, I try to keep as much of the original shape as possible and design my letters using negative space by filling in the parts which won't be there in the final composition. I am normally using the same approach to create letter forms, and you can find my lettering guide in the resources for this class. Feel free to use it. Follow the shape of the animal when drawing internal lines to make the composition more organic and to communicate the character better. So, if there are certain stylistic features which can be used to communicate the character, like feathers, sharp lines and angles, blobs or spots, smooth curves or anything else which comes from the shape of the animal or its details, try to make use of it to create a more organic look of your lettering composition. But don't feel obliged to do that, because not all animals will have very distinct features or letterform-like shapes, and it also might be easier for you to start with some very simple shapes. Also, you probably have noticed that with my lettering, I'm not really sticking to either upper or lower case letters, but rather mix them inside my composition, considering what is more legible in each particular case within the shape. So don't be afraid to combine cases and stack the letters and words up, as long as they are still legible and the overall composition is readable. So now, as we have roughly sketched out letter forms, we can move on to developing the lettering style further.